So I thought to make a complimentary video for my last one, in which I was, touching on Islam and Palestine. And I was saying that although I'm not a fan of Islam, I do recognize certain principles and qualities of Islam to be very good, and that could be applied to the ideal society. So I thought to, just break down a little what I think are some pros and cons of Islam. And so, yeah. First of all, just like the principle of acknowledging a higher intelligence and its governance over all of existence, being like humbly acknowledging and recognizing that. Like, yeah, acknowledging the superiority of the cosmic intelligence which governs everything and which our consciousness belongs to. That is a very good principle in itself. And Muslims can, good Muslims can be very grounded because they have this consistent, practice of praying that can stabilize individuals. Like, it's something we all should do, not necessarily praying in that sense, in that regard, but like meditating or praying, just it's very grounding, and it reflects in the demeanor and behavior of these Muslim people. And then again, when I say good Muslims, that is the kind of thing that is like a kind of a con with Islam, because, the definition of what is a good person is like, it's like the rigidity of like, if you don't acknowledge this being the name of God, and this being the proper prophet, and this being the correct book with the correct knowledge and whatnot, it's like, yeah, it's kind of square, very square and rigid like that. It's like, people can be the most amazing people without following any religion. Even atheist people can be some of the best people. They're just like, I'm just being good and having integrity and doing good by myself because it's the right thing to do. I don't need to have a hell, or I don't need to fear the wrath of God, or fear hell and therefore act right. No, I'm acting right because it's the right thing to do. Being decent people. But I say, I just don't understand how people cannot acknowledge a higher intelligence. Like, it's kind of crazy, but it's not. I mean, it's none of my business really, like that. Anyway, and another good quality with Islam is the sobriety thing. I mean, sobriety is encouraged within most religions really, but I would say Muslims seems to be the ones that stick mostly to it. And that's what I mean, especially with Muslim women. I can appreciate, because they this is one of the qualities. Many Muslim women, although not all of them, but many, even though maybe they grew up in fear, being very restricted from their families and whatnot, it's like as they grow up, it's like they when they're older, it's like they still stay away from that. And many can still go to events and party and stuff, but they just don't indulge in that themselves. They can be dancing and hanging out with their friends and let them drink and have a good time like that, but they themselves stay sober, and that is good for the whole squad. So yeah, that is something I've seen repeatedly. And just the other day, I was actually working with a super adorable young lady that also was like, well, Muslim. And she was also like, yeah, she told me like uh, she never intoxicates. I mean, unless you're talking about well, stimulants, you know. It's a definition thing. According to like Vedic scriptures and whatnot, you know, you should not drink coffee and things like that are basically stimulants. But I think it's not too complicated what I'm saying. And another thing though, a con would be the whole thing of like many Muslims like kind of demanding their women to cover themselves up. And that is, I mean, in this society that we're living in, yeah, that is, there are benefits with that for sure. You know, people won't, you will definitely be less sexualized by society, and that and yeah, you will not grab as even nearly as much naughty attention, we could say. But still, the problem is not in the women's hair and bodies. The problem is in the dirty minds of men. But still, yeah, it is what it is. And well, Muslims, most Muslim people are, you know, either like Arabs, or they can be like, you know, Somalis or other Africans, and like they're basically kind of, you know, darker people, some more than others, but still darker people require more sunlight, more vitamin D. So covering the people needing, some of the people on the earth that needs the most sunlight get the least sunlight. That is because of those principles of having to cover themselves up and whatnot. It's, yeah, that is definitely a con. I mean, you should at least find some place once in a while to go out and really expose yourself to the sun. But that is not being encouraged because, well, people just don't know. People don't realize the sun is what gives life to all of this planet. So yeah. But yeah, exactly. And there was something more I wanted to say there. Yeah. Yeah. I can't pause this. I don't, there don't seem to be any function on this damn phone to pause, so I would have paused and think and then continue it, but I can't do that, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, more sunlight to the to Muslims in general. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say. It's, I mean, even in countries where you don't really have to cover yourself up in the same way, like India. India is one of the countries in the world that has most vitamin D deficiency, but that is because they, you know, they regard it as being a good thing, a beauty thing, or whatever, you know, a higher status thing, being paler, you know, and that is seen in China and many other countries, you know, and it's partially, largely, I would say, because of, well, racism, colonialism and whatnot, but it's not, that is not the whole deal. That it's been like that even before. So yeah, it's not just, basically my point is, it's not just because, like with Islam, women covering themselves up, not receiving enough sunlight and vitamin D in countries where you're not required in the same way to cover yourself up. They still do it voluntarily because of, well, beauty standards and higher status and bullshit. So yeah. And it's not like I actually have any views. My first 2 videos on this channel got some views, but then it seems like, I don't know, the algorithm just shut me down. But I'm just here expressing myself. I've been encouraged to do this from so many multiple different angles and sources. So I'm just doing my thing. And so another thing then, well, something that I've heard, I will eventually have to read the Quran myself and get my own understanding of it. I've only heard from, others, people that have either been reading it with a bias of it being the right thing from the get-go, Islam is the right thing, the Quran is right, and they're reading it from that standpoint, being biased like that this is the right thing, and now I'm reading it. And then I've heard from others that read it from the opposite way. They are biased, like this is only bad and all is wrong, and that is from the standpoint they're reading it. So yeah, I'm gonna unbiasedly be reading it one day, but it takes ages for me to finish a book. I'm not a good reader unless I'm just researching certain things, especially when it comes to like nutrition and health. That I've been doing a lot of research, and I've been reading a lot. I've spent many days and hours researching like that, but reading actual books takes a long time for me. But I will eventually have to read the Quran and get my own full understanding of it. But I've heard that one thing as I've understood, although I don't know, but it seems like, unlike the Bible, is like that speaks very much coded language, and many metaphors and this and that. But although most Christians take it literally, but I mean, as I've understood, the Quran is more like, seems to be more direct. But again, I don't know. But what I've heard is that, like, according to the Quran, God is said to be the proudest, and that is definitely not a godly thing in my understanding. I will never acknowledge a God, although there's only God, and then there are demigods, if you ask me, definitely, but there's one source of it all, which is God. God is the totality of everything. All consciousness belongs to God, to the smallest ants, to demigods, to everything. Yeah, all consciousness by the end of the day belongs to God. But yeah, I would say God, if God was the proudest, that is not a God I am worshipping. Although I F a lot with Krishna, and well, in the Bhagavad Gita or like the Vedic scriptures and whatnot, it's like it's said that Krishna is the most of everything, and that kind of makes sense in a way, like the most humble, the most the wittiest, the strongest, the whatever quality it is like a being that is most of that you can recognize as Krishna himself, and so even the proudest might be, I mean, because the both sides, like we say, Satan is like a shadow aspect of God that is, well, necessary for experience to be created and for eternal cosmic evolution and expansion to occur, to take place, contraction and expansion. So Satan is necessary in that point. So in that sense, it makes sense that even the so-called bad qualities, like being the proudest or being the most cunning and the most deceiving and everything, all of those things, it's like, yeah, that would be God also by the end of the day. But but in the Quran, as I've heard, it's said clearly that like God, Allah, is the proudest, and that is not something that I mean, that if again, depending on how it's said, but if that is kind of somewhat, what you'd say, isolated, if that claim is isolated from a more, well, wholesome, holistic explanation, then I cannot F with it. And I've also heard another thing that, well, ultimately the purpose of, you know, Islam and the Quran is to spread it all over the world, and like, you know, Sharia law. And I don't know, this might just be the negative, you know, the ones that's been reading the Quran with the negative bias that interpret it this way, but I've heard from such people and ex-Muslims and whatnot, even like active Islamists, that is, you know, the case. And I don't know if, you know, it's a question of interpretation, but it seems to be quite direct that, yeah, spreading of Islam is a must. That is like the purpose of Muslims to do, and by whatever means necessary. And it's even okay to lie if that can expand Islam, because it's for a good cause by the end of the day, you know. Yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. That's not wholesome. But I don't know. I really don't know. And now to wrap it up, this video is getting way too long for most people's attention spans. And then again, I don't even have any views, but I'm doing my thing. And so I also realized, you know, because I put it out, my last video, I kind of, you know, I kind of got some answers myself regarding the whole thing with Palestine. And like I was saying, like, well, Palestine coming from a culture that, you know, they don't, like, they wouldn't, if the role, I was questioning basically, like, why should the Western world be encouraged to help Palestine when Palestine is like an Islam country, and if they would get rid of the Western world. And I honestly don't believe that if the roles were reversed, that like a non-Muslim country were in big trouble like Palestine, and Palestine was in a more favorable position, that they would help that country. They would only help that country if it, like, in exchange for them converting. That is what I believe. That's what I think. I mean, that's what I definitely think and believe. Although some Muslim people, of course, would help, and because they're good people and not necessarily good Muslims, you know. Most Muslim people that are like good Muslims are also good people, not just good Muslims, because the definition thing there. But I did realize though, well, I guess the reason why it could be good for it could be good for the Western world to help, or like, yeah, non-Muslim countries to help Palestine, is just for unity, you know, for them to receive help from people that they don't expect help from, and that could change, you know, things like reduce hate and enhancing love and compassion and unity. You know, it's an opportunity in every adversity. But at the same time, as what I've kind of seen is that, well, with Islam, it's like here in Sweden, for instance, you know, there's a lot of like Muslim people, and all of the Western world, you know, there's a lot of Muslim people that have immigrated, and there are there are a lot of there are a lot of, well, those Muslims, those people more like Islamists, you know, they're like, you know, well, yeah, it's because, I mean, they are not grateful at all. And it's like, they're like, yeah, we are being, it's by the grace of God that we are being allowed to come here so that we eventually can conquer it. That's why we are coming here in so many numbers, in so large numbers, because we will eventually conquer it. And I think they might will. But that is not because of the grace of God. That is because, well, the governments, like I said, like, people should be grateful for being allowed to come into another country where, yeah, they can live more peacefully. But know that these governments bringing all of these refugees in, it's not because they want to help them. They don't want to help anyone. They're only doing that to cause destabilization. Because, I mean, guess what? It's nothing racist about it. It's just, if you bring a whole lot of people from a whole lot of very messed up countries, expect a whole lot of them to be very messed up. Not the majority, but you don't need a majority of them to be messed up in order to create destabilization, which is what they want. So, yeah. But yeah, so that obviously these Islamists, they don't acknowledge that. They're just like, yeah, we're being allowed to come here because, well, it's the grace of God, and we are coming here because God wants us to conquer these countries, you know. So in that regard, it's like, okay, yeah, if the Western world or non-Muslim countries were to help Palestine and Yemen and whatever Muslim countries like that, it's like, yeah, but that's because, like, because of grace of God, and like, it's just because, of course, that's the right thing, you know. Of course, many people would appreciate it, but still, it's like, it's kind of also like a risk for a lot of, like, ungratefulness being associated with it. Anyway, there is definitely much more that also can be discussed and said about this whole thing, but I gotta wrap it up for now. And yeah, that's what it is. If you've been watching, yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, be blessed. Although English is a tricky language, blessed is like be less. So, but what I mean is, yeah, thank you and all the best. Yeah, peace.